Karen Martinez walked into Judge Judy's courtroom like she owned the place, her $800 designer heels clicking against the polished floor with the rhythm of someone who had never lost an argument in her life. Her perfectly manicured nails gripped a Louis Vuitton handbag that cost more than most people's monthly rent. And her hair was styled in that particular way that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager," from across the room. She took her place at the defendant's table with a smirk that could cut glass, completely unaware that in exactly 14 minutes, a single laugh would cost her more money than she had ever lost in her entire privileged existence. This wasn't just another small claims case. This was the day Karen learned that some authorities cannot be intimidated, some judges cannot be manipulated, and some moments of arrogance come with a price tag that would make her credit card weep. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Across from her sat Rebecca Chen, a soft-spoken elementary school teacher whose hands trembled slightly as she organized her folder of evidence. Rebecca had endured 8 months of harassment, threatening text messages at 2 a.m., deliberate property damage, and neighborhood intimidation that had turned her dream home into a walking nightmare. She had filed police reports that went nowhere, complained to the HOA that did nothing, and finally, in desperation, dragged Karen to the one place where money and attitude meant absolutely nothing, Judge Judy's courtroom. Rebecca wasn't here for revenge. She was here for something far more powerful, justice, and she had no idea she was about to get a front-row seat to the most spectacular courtroom meltdown in television history. Judge Judy Sheindlin sat behind her bench, her sharp eyes scanning the case file with the precision of a surgeon examining an X-ray. At 81 years old, she had presided over more than 12,000 cases, stared down con artists, liars, entitled brats, and every flavor of human nonsense imaginable. She had made a career out of cutting through excuses faster than a hot knife through butter, and her reputation was simple. Don't waste her time. Don't lie to her face, and above all, don't disrespect her courtroom. Karen had clearly never watched a single episode. She sat there scrolling through her iPhone, occasionally glancing up with an expression that suggested she had better places to be, more important people to see, and zero respect for the process that was about to humble her in ways she couldn't even imagine. The bailiff noticed. The camera crew noticed. And most importantly, Judge Judy noticed. The courtroom buzzed with that electric tension that only exists when something extraordinary is about to happen. Production assistants whispered to each other, sensing that this wasn't going to be a standard 15-minute ruling. The audience members who had waited hours for gallery seats leaned forward in anticipation, their phones silenced but their attention fully activated. This was Court TV's flagship show, broadcast to millions of living rooms across America, and everyone in that room could feel it. Something was different about this case. Something was brewing beneath the surface. Karen adjusted her designer sunglasses, pushing them up into her blonde highlights with the casual arrogance of someone who believed that charm and confidence could talk her out of anything. She had no idea that the woman behind that bench had built a 25-year television empire, specifically by destroying the egos of people exactly like her. Judge Judy cleared her throat, the sound cutting through the courtroom chatter like a warning shot. She looked up from her notes, her eyes landing on Karen with the intensity of a predator, sizing up prey that had wandered too close to the den. This was her arena. These were her rules. And Karen Martinez, with her expensive bag and entitled smirk, was about to learn what happens when you bring attitude to a woman who wrote the book on courtroom authority. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail. Karen's confident posture, Rebecca's nervous hope, Judge Judy's calculating gaze. And in that moment, before a single word was spoken, before the first question was asked, the stage was set for a confrontation that would go viral within hours, spark a national conversation about entitlement and consequences, and cost Karen Martinez exactly $7,500 for a laugh she hadn't even made yet. What Karen didn't know, what she couldn't have possibly predicted as she sat there checking her phone one last time, before the bailiff would confiscate it, was that Judge Judy had already spotted every red flag in the case file. The pattern of harassment, the threatening messages, the property damage, the previous complaints from other neighbors, and most damning of all, the 3 prior small claims cases where Karen had been the defendant, each one showing the same entitled behavior, the same refusal to accept responsibility, the same belief that rules were for other people. Judge Judy had seen 1,000 Karens walk through her courtroom doors. But this one, this particular entitled nightmare sitting across from a terrified teacher, was about to become a legendary example of what happens when arrogance meets accountability on national television. The gavel hadn't fallen yet, but the verdict was already written in Judge Judy's eyes. This was going to hurt. Judge Judy opened the case file with a deliberate slowness that made the entire courtroom hold its breath. "Ms. Chen," she began, her voice carrying that signature Brooklyn accent that had become synonymous with no-nonsense justice. "Tell me why we're here today." Rebecca cleared her throat, her voice soft but steady as she explained the 8 months of hell Karen had put her through, the threatening text messages that arrived at all hours, the accidental destruction of her fence, the intimidation tactics at neighborhood gatherings, the constant, relentless harassment that had turned her home into a prison. She spoke for 3 minutes, presenting each piece of evidence with the careful precision of someone who had been dismissed too many times before. When she finished, Judge Judy nodded slowly, her expression unreadable but her eyes sharp with understanding. Then came Karen's turn. She stood up without being asked, a power move that immediately annoyed Judge Judy, and launched into her defense with the confidence of someone who had talked her way out of consequences her entire life. "Your Honor, honestly, this whole thing is just ridiculous," she began, her voice dripping with condescension as she gestured dismissively toward Rebecca. "I'm a marketing executive. I have a master's degree from USC. I've lived in that neighborhood for 6 years, and I've never had any problems with anyone except her." She emphasized the word "her" like it was something distasteful, and Judge Judy's eyebrow rose slightly, a warning sign that Karen completely missed. "This is clearly a personality conflict that's been blown completely out of proportion. I'm a busy professional. I have client meetings, deadlines, responsibilities. I shouldn't even be here dealing with this nonsense." The word nonsense hung in the air like a grenade with its pin pulled. Judge Judy slowly placed her pen down on the bench, the small click echoing through the silent courtroom with the finality of a weapon being cocked. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked onto Karen with an intensity that would make seasoned lawyers nervous. "Excuse me?" Her voice was dangerously quiet, each word measured and precise. "Did you just tell me what you should or shouldn't be doing?" Karen incredibly doubled down. "Well, Your Honor, I'm just saying this is a waste of everyone's time. I have a conference call at 3 o'clock. I was hoping we could wrap this up quickly because I really have more important things." She never got to finish that sentence. "The only thing you need to do today," Judge Judy interrupted, her voice rising with controlled fury, "is stand there, answer my questions, and show some respect for this process. Do you understand that, or do I need to use smaller words?" The courtroom collectively gasped. The bailiff's lips twitched with a suppressed smile. Rebecca's eyes went wide, and Karen, for the first time since entering the courtroom, felt a cold finger of doubt trace down her spine, but her pride wouldn't let her back down. "Of course, Your Honor, I just meant that—" "I don't care what you meant," Judge Judy snapped. "I care about what you did. Now sit down and don't interrupt me again." Judge Judy picked up the first exhibit with the care of someone handling evidence at a crime scene. "Let's talk about these text messages," she said, her voice ice cold as she began reading directly from the printed screenshots. "You'll regret messing with me. I'll make your life a living hell. Watch your back." She paused, looking up at Karen over her reading glasses. "Is this your phone number, Ms. Martinez?" Karen shifted uncomfortably, her confident posture beginning to crack. "Yes, but Your Honor, those messages are completely taken out of context. I was emotional. Rebecca had been provoking me for weeks and I just—" "Provoking you how?" Judge Judy interrupted sharply. "By existing? By living in her own home that she pays for." Karen's face flushed red. "She filed complaints with the HOA about my parking. She's constantly watching my house, judging everything I do. She's obsessed with me." Judge Judy set down the text messages and picked up another document, this one thicker, stapled together with yellow highlighting throughout. "This is a complaint log from your HOA. 17 violations in 18 months. Parking in fire lanes, blocking mailboxes, leaving trash bins in the street for days, hosting loud parties past noise ordinance hours, playing music at 2 a.m. on weeknights." She looked up, her expression one of complete disdain. "And you think she's the problem?" Karen opened her mouth to respond, but Judge Judy held up her hand like a traffic cop stopping oncoming vehicles. "I'm not finished. We also have photographs of Ms. Chen's fence, which mysteriously collapsed the day after she filed a complaint about your dog running loose in her yard. A fence that had stood perfectly fine for 8 years suddenly just fell over. How convenient." Karen's lawyer persona kicked in, her voice taking on a rehearsed quality. "Your Honor, I have no proof that I had anything to do with that fence. Correlation doesn't equal—" "Don't you dare lecture me about correlation and causation," Judge Judy snapped, her patience visibly evaporating like water on hot asphalt. "I've been practicing law since before you were born. I know exactly what I'm looking at here." She flipped through more documents, each page turned deliberate and damning. "We have 3 neighbors who submitted statements saying they witnessed you verbally threaten Ms. Chen in the community parking lot. We have ring camera footage showing you keying her car. We have vet records showing your dog attacked her cat, and you refused to pay the medical bills. And we have police reports, not one, not two, but 4 separate incidents where officers had to come to your street because of disturbances you caused. Karen's face had gone from red to pale white, the color draining as the weight of evidence piled higher and higher like an avalanche burying her defenses. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, assuming that legendary pose that every courtroom television fan recognized as the moment of reckoning. I've heard enough. And quite frankly, I've heard too much from you and your excuses. She looked directly at Rebecca, her expression softening just slightly. Ms. Chen, you came here asking for $2,500 to cover your fence repair, veterinary bills, and the cost to fix your car. That's actually remarkably restrained considering what you've been put through. Rebecca nodded, tears beginning to well in her eyes as she realized justice was finally within reach. Judge Judy turned her attention back to Karen, and the softness vanished instantly, replaced by judicial steel. Ms. Martinez, you have shown a pattern of harassment, property destruction, and complete disregard for your neighbor's rights and peace. You think your degree makes you special? You think your job makes you important? You think your designer clothes make you untouchable? The courtroom was so quiet you could hear the camera operators breathing. Let me make something clear to you. In this courtroom, none of that matters. What matters is the evidence, the law, and basic human decency. You have failed spectacularly on all 3 counts. Judge Judy straightened the papers in front of her with a sharp tap against the bench. Judgment for the plaintiff in the full amount of $2,500. You will pay for the fence you destroyed, the vet bills your dog caused, and the damage to her vehicle. Case closed. She reached for her gavel, the universal symbol that this nightmare was over, that Rebecca could finally go home and sleep peacefully knowing the law had sided with truth. But then it happened. The sound that would change everything. A laugh, not a small nervous chuckle, not an awkward giggle of relief, but a full mocking, sarcastic laugh that erupted from Karen's throat like a volcanic explosion of pure entitlement. Are you kidding me? Karen said, still laughing, shaking her head in theatrical disbelief. $2,500? This is absolutely ridiculous. The gavel, which had been hovering an inch above the sound block, froze in midair. The temperature in the courtroom dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Every single person in that room felt it. The bailiff's hand instinctively moved toward Karen as if preparing to physically restrain someone who had just made a catastrophic mistake. The camera operators zoomed in simultaneously, their professional instincts screaming that they were about to capture television gold. Rebecca's mouth fell open in shock, unable to believe that Karen was actually making things worse. And Judge Judy, the woman who had seen every flavor of human stupidity imaginable in her quarter-century behind the bench, slowly lowered her gavel and turned her full attention back to Karen Martinez with an expression that could freeze hell itself. Excuse me? Judge Judy's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried more menace than a scream ever could. Did you just laugh at my verdict? Karen, incredibly, was still smirking, still shaking her head like this was all some cosmic joke being played on her specifically. Your Honor, I'm sorry, but this is just absurd. $2,500 for a fence and some vet bills? I mean, come on. This is... She made a dismissive hand gesture, waving away the judgment like it was an annoying mosquito. That gesture, that single flippant wave of her manicured hand, was the exact moment her entire world began to collapse. Judge Judy stood up. She actually stood up from her chair, something so rare that the bailiff's eyes went wide with a mixture of excitement and fear. When Judge Judy Scheindlin stands up, someone's life is about to change dramatically, and never for the better. Stand up, Judge Judy commanded, her voice now carrying the full weight of her judicial authority. Karen's smirk finally began to fade, confusion replacing arrogance. What? I said stand up, Ms. Martinez, right now. Karen slowly rose to her feet, her Louis Vuitton bag slipping from her lap and hitting the floor with a thud that sounded like a death knell. Judge Judy walked to the front of her bench, an action so unprecedented that the courtroom audience collectively leaned forward, afraid to blink and miss what was about to happen. You think this is funny? You think my courtroom is a joke? You think you can laugh at a legal judgment issued by a sitting judge on national television? Each question hit like a hammer blow, and Karen's face began transitioning from confusion to the early stages of panic. Your Honor, I didn't mean to disrespect. Oh, you meant it, Judge Judy interrupted, her voice rising with controlled fury. You absolutely meant it. You've meant every dismissive comment, every eye roll, every condescending word since you walked through that door. You came in here thinking your credentials would intimidate me. You thought your attitude would make me question my judgment. You thought wrong. Judge Judy returned to her seat, but she didn't sit down. She stood behind the bench like a general addressing troops before battle. Let me educate you about something they apparently didn't teach you at USC. When you enter a courtroom, any courtroom, you are bound by the laws of this land and the rules of judicial decorum. You show respect. You accept the ruling. You do not laugh at the judge. Karen tried one more time to salvage the situation, her voice now shaking. Your Honor, please, I apologize. I was just surprised by the amount. I didn't mean any disrespect to you or this court. Too late, Judge Judy said flatly. You've shown contempt for this process from the moment you sat down. And now you've shown contempt for my verdict. That's called contempt of court, Miss Martinez. And it comes with consequences. She picked up her gavel and the entire room held its breath. Your judgment to Ms. Chen remains $2,500 for damages, as I already ruled. Pause. Karen exhaled slightly, thinking maybe she'd escaped. However, for your contempt of this court, for laughing at a legal verdict, and for your complete lack of respect for the judicial process, I'm adding an additional fine of $5,000 payable to this court. The gavel came down like thunder. Crack. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Karen's legs nearly gave out beneath her. 5,000? She shrieked, her voice cracking with panic. For laughing? You can't do that. This is insane. I want to appeal. You're dismissed, Judge Judy said coldly. And if you say one more word, I'll make it $10,000, bailiff. Escort her out. Karen stumbled backward as the bailiff gently but firmly guided her toward the courtroom exit, her designer heels catching on the carpet as her brain struggled to process what had just happened. $7,500, she whispered to herself, the number repeating like a nightmare mantra. $7,500. Her hands trembled as she clutched her Louis Vuitton bag, the expensive accessory suddenly feeling like a scarlet letter marking her public humiliation. Behind her, Rebecca Chen stood at the plaintiff's table with tears streaming down her face. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of vindication, of relief, of finally being heard and believed after 8 months of being gaslit and terrorized by the woman now being escorted out in disgrace. The courtroom doors closed behind Karen with a finality that sounded like a prison cell locking. In the hallway, away from Judge Judy's penetrating gaze, Karen immediately pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed a number. Mom? Mom, you're not going to believe what just happened. Her voice cracked, oscillating between rage and panic. She charged me $5,000 for laughing. Laughing, this is insane. I'm going to sue. I'm going to appeal. I'm going to... But even as she spoke, she could hear the doubt in her own voice. Deep down, beneath the layers of entitlement and denial, a small voice whispered the truth. She had destroyed herself on national television, and there was no coming back from this. Inside the courtroom, the audience erupted into whispered conversations the moment Judge Judy exited to her chambers. Camera operators were already reviewing footage, knowing they had just captured something special. The production assistant was on her phone within seconds. You need to see this case. It's going viral for sure. The defendant literally laughed at the verdict. Within 3 hours, the clip was uploaded to Court TV's YouTube channel. Within 6 hours, it had 200,000 views. By the end of the day, it crossed 2 million. TikTok users downloaded the clip and added commentary. The sound of Judge Judy's gavel becoming a viral audio clip used in thousands of videos. Twitter exploded with reactions. She really thought she could laugh at Judge Judy and walk away. That's $5,000 worth of finding out. Reddit's legal advice forums broke down the contempt charge, confirming that yes, judges absolutely have the authority to fine for courtroom disrespect, and yes, Karen got exactly what she deserved. The hashtag #ChakraExpensiveLaugh began trending, with users sharing their own stories of entitled people facing consequences, but none quite as satisfying as Karen's $5,000 chuckle. 3 weeks after the hearing, Karen Martinez quietly paid the $7,500 judgment in full. She had consulted with 2 different attorneys about appealing the contempt charge, and both had told her the same thing. Judge Judy was absolutely within her legal rights. The charge would stand, and pursuing an appeal would only cost more money and generate more publicity for her humiliation. She paid, she stayed off social media, and according to neighbors, she listed her house for sale within a month, unable to face the community that had watched her spectacular downfall on national television. Rebecca Chen, meanwhile, used part of her settlement to install security cameras around her property, and finally got that peaceful night's sleep she'd been dreaming about for 8 months. She framed a photo of herself with Judge Judy that was taken after the case, a reminder that standing up for yourself even when you're terrified can lead to justice. The case became more than just viral entertainment. It became a teaching moment that resonated across the country. Judge Judy's handling of Karen wasn't about cruelty or entertainment value. It was about something far more fundamental. The principle that courtrooms are sacred spaces where respect isn't optional, where the law applies equally regardless of your education or bank account, and where consequences exist for those who mock the very system designed to protect society's order. Karen had walked into that courtroom believing her credentials would shield her, that her confidence would intimidate. and that her charm could manipulate the outcome. She learned in the most expensive way possible that none of those things matter when you're standing before someone who values integrity over image. The lesson for all of us is crystal clear. Respect costs nothing, but disrespect can cost everything. Karen's 30-second laugh wasn't just an expression of surprise or frustration. It was the physical manifestation of a lifetime of entitlement, of believing that rules were suggestions for people like her, of thinking that authority figures could be dismissed with a smirk and a wave. Judge Judy didn't punish Karen for laughing. She punished her for the attitude that made her think laughing was acceptable. There's a reason Judge Judy has presided over more than 12,000 cases and maintained her position as America's most trusted television judge for over 2 decades. She understands that justice isn't just about awarding damages or assigning blame. It's about teaching lessons that echo beyond the courtroom walls. Lessons about accountability, respect, and the fundamental truth that no one, absolutely no one, is above the law. Karen Martinez learned that lesson for $5,000. But for the millions who watched her downfall, who shared the clip, who laughed at her expense and then paused to reflect on their own behavior, the lesson was free. And sometimes the most valuable education comes from watching someone else pay the tuition. Judge Judy didn't just deliver a verdict that day. She delivered a masterclass in consequences, and the whole world was taking notes. If this story reminded you that respect and humility aren't weaknesses but survival skills, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss another dose of real-world justice. Drop a comment below and tell me, what would you have said to Karen if you were Judge Judy? Could you have kept your composure? Or would you have gone even harder on her? I want to know what you think. And here's the thing. If you know someone in your life who could benefit from hearing this story, someone who thinks their status puts them above basic decency, do them a favor and share this video. Sometimes people need to see consequences happen to someone else before they change their own behavior. This case proves that karma is real, that justice exists, and that a single moment of arrogance can cost you more than you ever imagined. Don't be a Karen. Your reputation and your bank account will thank you. Thanks for watching, and remember, the law doesn't care about your LinkedIn profile. I'll see you in the next one, and trust me, we've got even more jaw-dropping courtroom moments coming your way. Entitled suburban mom Karen Matthews storms into small claims court, demanding a full jury trial over a measly $200 fender bender. But what she doesn't know is that Judge Judy has been waiting 25 years for someone exactly like her. In the most brutal courtroom takedown ever captured on camera, Judge Judy doesn't just deny Karen's ridiculous demands. She obliterates her entire worldview, exposes her darkest secrets, and leaves her sobbing in front of millions. The aftermath? Karen's life implodes in ways she never saw coming. Watch the moment that destroyed an entitled woman's reputation forever. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. It was supposed to be just another Tuesday morning at the downtown small claims courthouse. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting that familiar harsh glow across worn wooden benches. Court clerks shuffled paperwork with practiced efficiency, their voices echoing off marble walls that had witnessed decades of petty disputes. Outside, morning commuters rushed past, completely unaware that inside these walls a moment of pure justice was about to unfold. A moment that would make headlines, break the internet, and restore faith in the American legal system. Karen Matthews sat in the front row, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently against her designer handbag. She wore a cream-colored Chanel suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her blonde hair styled in that signature suburban mom bob that screamed entitlement from a mile away. Her lips, painted in an aggressive shade of coral, were pressed into a thin line of disgust as she surveyed the courthouse around her. This wasn't her world. These weren't her people. And she was about to make damn sure everyone knew it. But what Karen didn't realize, what she couldn't possibly have anticipated, was that sitting behind the judge's bench was a woman who had built her entire career on destroying people exactly like her. Judge Judy Shindlin had presided over thousands of cases, dealt with every type of entitled plaintiff imaginable, but something about Karen's case file had caught her attention. Something that made her cancel her afternoon appointments and clear her entire schedule, because Judge Judy had done her homework, and what she'd discovered about Karen Matthews was about to turn this routine hearing into a masterclass in humiliation. The bailiff called the court to order, his voice cutting through the morning chatter like a knife. Karen stood up, adjusting her suit jacket with an air of superiority that made several spectators exchange knowing glances. She had that look, the look of someone who had never been told no in her entire privileged life. The look of someone who believed rules were for other people, the look of someone who was about to learn the hardest lesson of her existence. As Karen approached the plaintiff's table, she pulled out a thick manila folder stuffed with what appeared to be legal documents. But these weren't ordinary small claims paperwork. These were demands, constitutional arguments, threats of appeals, a complete misunderstanding of how the legal system actually worked, wrapped up in the arrogance of someone who watched too many legal dramas and thought she understood the law. The defendant, a working-class mechanic named Miguel Rodriguez, sat quietly at his table, still wearing his work uniform from the night shift. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Here was a man who worked with his hands, who earned every dollar through honest labor, facing off against a woman who had never worked a real day in her life. Miguel's case was simple. Karen had rear-ended his truck in a parking lot, caused $200 in damage, and was now trying to claim he was somehow at fault. But Karen had other plans. Plans that would shock the courtroom and set the stage for the most savage judicial beatdown in legal history. If you love seeing entitled people get the reality check they desperately deserve, smash that like button right now because you're about to witness the most satisfying courtroom destruction you've ever seen. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when Judge Judy discovers Karen's hidden secrets. Karen Matthews wasn't just any entitled suburban mom. She was the wife of a prominent real estate developer, the queen bee of her gated community's homeowner association, and a woman who had spent the last 15 years wielding her husband's money like a weapon against anyone who dared cross her path. Her 3-story McMansion sat on the most expensive street in Westfield Heights, complete with a circular driveway where her white BMW X7 gleamed like a trophy of her superiority. She had never lost an argument with a store manager, never been denied a refund, and certainly never been told that her demands were unreasonable. The incident that brought her to court was laughably trivial, even by small claims standards. 3 weeks earlier, Karen had been texting while backing out of a Whole Foods parking space when she bumped into Miguel's work truck. The damage was minimal, a small dent and scratched paint that any reasonable person would have handled through insurance. But Karen Matthews wasn't reasonable. She was furious that Miguel had the audacity to park his ugly work vehicle next to her luxury SUV in the first place. What started as a simple fender bender quickly escalated when Karen began screaming at Miguel in the parking lot, demanding to know why someone like him was shopping at her grocery store. She called the police, claiming he had intentionally positioned his truck to damage her car. When the responding officer politely explained that the evidence clearly showed she was at fault, Karen demanded to speak to his supervisor. Then the supervisor then threatened to call the mayor, who she claimed was a personal friend. Miguel, a hard-working father of 2 who had been pulling double shifts to save for his daughter's college fund, simply wanted his truck repaired so he could continue working. But Karen had other plans. She hired a lawyer, filed a countersuit claiming emotional distress, and began a campaign of harassment that included calling Miguel's employer and trying to get him fired. When her lawyer quietly advised her to settle and warned that her case was frivolous, Karen fired him and decided to represent herself. But that wasn't the worst part. In her twisted mind, Karen had convinced herself that this case was about more than money. It was about principle. It was about showing people like Miguel their place in the social hierarchy. It was about using the legal system to prove that her word mattered more than the truth. The manila folder she clutched contained her masterpiece of legal ignorance. Karen had spent weeks researching constitutional law, convinced that she had discovered loopholes that would force the court to grant her demands. She had printed out articles about jury trials, constitutional amendments, and legal precedents that she completely misunderstood. In her mind, she was about to school everyone in that courtroom about how the law really worked. As the court clerk called the case, Karen stood with the confidence of someone who believed she held all the cards. She had practiced her opening statement in front of her bathroom mirror for hours, perfecting the tone of righteous indignation that had served her so well in PTA meetings and country club disputes. She was ready to demand not just a jury trial, but a change of venue, a court-appointed attorney, and compensation for her time and suffering. What Karen didn't know was that Judge Judy had received an unusual phone call the night before. Miguel's previous lawyer, the one Karen had forced him to fire through her harassment campaign, had contacted the court with some disturbing information about Karen's behavior. There were recordings of threatening voicemails, evidence of attempted witness intimidation, and a pattern of abuse that went far beyond this simple parking lot incident. Judge Judy had also done some research of her own. A few phone calls to colleagues in the family court system revealed that Karen was no stranger to legal proceedings. There were restraining orders filed by former neighbors, complaints from service workers, and a lengthy history of using litigation as a tool of intimidation. This wasn't Karen's first time trying to destroy someone's life over a minor inconvenience. It was a pattern. As Karen approached the podium, her heels clicking against the marble floor with the rhythm of approaching doom, She had no idea that she wasn't just facing a judge.
She was facing a woman who had spent a quarter-century dealing with bullies,
who had built her reputation on protecting the innocent from predators, and who was about to use every tool at her disposal to make sure Karen Matthews never terrorized another working person again. The courtroom fell silent as Karen cleared her throat, preparing to deliver what she believed would be a brilliant legal argument. But Judge Judy was already 3 steps ahead, her fingers drumming quietly against her desk as she prepared to unleash 25 years of judicial fury on the most deserving target she had encountered in years. Karen stepped to the podium with the swagger of someone who believed she was about to make legal history. She opened her manila folder with theatrical precision, pulling out a stack of papers that she had organized with color-coded tabs and sticky notes. The courtroom spectators, mostly there for other cases, began to sense that something unusual was about to unfold. "Your Honor," Karen began, her voice dripping with the condescension she typically reserved for retail workers and restaurant servers. "Before we proceed with this trivial matter, I must invoke my constitutional right to a trial by jury. The Sixth Amendment clearly states that in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury." Judge Judy's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained stone cold. She had heard thousands of pro se litigants butcher legal concepts before, but Karen's arrogance was already setting her apart from the usual crowd of confused defendants. "Furthermore," Karen continued, gaining confidence from what she mistook as judicial interest, "I demand that this case be transferred to federal court, where my constitutional rights will be properly protected. This small claims proceeding is clearly insufficient for a matter of this magnitude." A few spectators exchanged glances. Even those with no legal training could sense that something was very wrong with Karen's argument. Miguel's jaw dropped as he realized that Karen was about to turn a simple $200 dispute into a federal case. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, her fingers steepled in front of her. When she spoke, her voice was calm but carried the weight of decades of judicial authority. "Ms. Matthews, are you quite finished with your constitutional lecture?" Karen's smile faltered for just a moment before she pressed on. "Your Honor, I've spent considerable time researching the applicable law, and I believe this court lacks jurisdiction to—" "Stop." Judge Judy's single word cut through Karen's speech like a scalpel. The courtroom fell completely silent. "Ms. Matthews, before you continue embarrassing yourself further, let me explain something very basic about the legal system that you've apparently failed to grasp despite all your research." Karen's face flushed red. She wasn't used to being interrupted, especially not by someone who was supposed to be serving her interests. "Your Honor, with all due respect, I have every right to—" "You have the right to remain silent," Judge Judy said, her voice rising with the first hint of the storm to come. "And given the legal nonsense you've been spewing for the last 2 minutes, I strongly suggest you exercise that right." The spectators were now fully engaged, sensing that they were about to witness something special. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For the first time in years, someone had not only interrupted her but had done so with such authority that she actually felt small. "This is a civil small claims matter, not a criminal prosecution," Judge Judy continued, her voice building momentum. "Your Sixth Amendment argument is about as relevant as a chocolate teapot. And your demand for federal jurisdiction tells me that you understand less about the law than my bailiff's goldfish." Karen tried to speak, but Judge Judy raised her hand with the authority of someone who had controlled courtrooms longer than Karen had been manipulating store managers. "We're just getting started, Ms. Matthews. And before this day is over, you're going to learn exactly how the law works when you can't buy your way out of consequences." Judge Judy stood up slowly, her black robes flowing like the wings of justice itself. The courtroom atmosphere shifted from mild curiosity to electric anticipation as she began to pace behind her bench, her eyes never leaving Karen's increasingly pale face. "Ms. Matthews, let me educate you about small claims court since your expensive research clearly failed you," Judge Judy began, her voice carrying the weight of 25 years of judicial experience. "Small claims court has a maximum jurisdiction of $5,000. You're here fighting over $200. There are no juries in small claims court. There are no appeals to federal court. There are no constitutional violations. There's just you making a fool of yourself on a Tuesday morning." Karen tried to interrupt, raising her manicured finger. "But Your Honor, the principle of the matter—" "And the principle?" Judge Judy's voice rose sharply. "Let's talk about principles, shall we? You rear-ended Mr. Rodriguez's truck while texting about your yoga class. The police report clearly states you were at fault. Instead of taking responsibility like an adult, you've spent 3 weeks and probably thousands of dollars trying to destroy a hard-working man's life over pocket change." The spectators were now leaning forward in their seats. This wasn't just a legal proceeding anymore. It was a moral reckoning. But that's not even the worst part. Judge Judy continued, pulling out a file that made Karen's eyes widen with recognition. I've done some research of my own, Ms. Matthews. Would you like to tell the court about Mrs. Henderson? Your 70-year-old neighbor whom you sued for $10,000 because her rose bushes allegedly decreased your property value? Karen's face went white. That's not relevant to this case. Or perhaps you'd like to explain why you filed a restraining order against a teenage pizza delivery driver because he accidentally rang your doorbell twice. Judge Judy's voice was building to a crescendo. Or why 3 different housekeepers have quit your employ and filed complaints with the labor board. The courtroom was dead silent except for the sound of Karen's rapid breathing. Miguel sat stunned, finally understanding why this woman had made his life hell for 3 weeks. You see, Ms. Matthews, you've turned litigation into a hobby. You use the legal system like a weapon to terrorize anyone who doesn't bow down to your sense of entitlement. But today, that stops. Karen's voice cracked as she tried to respond. Your Honor, those cases were... I was just protecting my right. Protecting your rights? Judge Judy laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean protecting your ability to abuse people who can't afford to fight back? Well, congratulations, Ms. Matthews, you've finally met someone who can. The judge's eyes blazed with righteous fury. You want to know what principles look like? Mr. Rodriguez works 60 hours a week to support his family. He's never sued anyone, never filed a frivolous complaint, never tried to destroy someone's livelihood over hurt feelings. That's principle, Ms. Matthews. What you practice is privilege. Wrapped in legal threats, Karen's hands were visibly shaking now as the weight of public humiliation crashed down on her perfectly constructed world. Judge Judy stepped down from her bench, moving closer to Karen with the deliberate pace of someone delivering final judgment. The courtroom held its collective breath as she prepared to deliver what would become the most devastating judicial speech ever recorded. You want to know what really disgusts me, Ms. Matthews? Judge Judy's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more power than any shout. It's not your ignorance of the law. It's not even your complete lack of personal responsibility. It's that you've weaponized the very system designed to protect people like Mr. Rodriguez from people like you. Karen's perfectly applied makeup was beginning to run as tears of humiliation mixed with her foundation. She tried to speak, but only a strangled whimper escaped her throat. You sit in your mansion, drive your luxury car, and spend your days finding new ways to torture working families because you're bored, because your life is so empty, so meaningless, that the only way you can feel powerful is by crushing people who actually contribute to society. The words hit Karen like physical blows. For the first time in her privileged life, someone was seeing through her carefully constructed facade and exposing the hollow, bitter person beneath. You called Mr. Rodriguez's truck ugly. You questioned his right to shop at your precious Whole Foods. You tried to get him fired for the crime of existing in your world. Judge Judy's voice rose to a thunderous crescendo. But you know what's truly ugly, Ms. Matthews? Your soul. Karen's legs buckled slightly. A woman in the gallery began to quietly applaud, then another, until the entire courtroom erupted in sustained applause that lasted nearly a minute. Through her tears, Karen whispered, I just wanted, what? Respect? Judge Judy cut her off. Respect is earned through character, through integrity, through treating others with dignity. You've spent 15 years proving you possess none of those qualities. Karen collapsed into her chair, sobbing openly now as years of entitled behavior finally caught up with her. The designer suit, the perfect hair, the arrogant posture, all of it crumbled away, leaving behind a broken woman who had finally met accountability. Judgment for the defendant. Ms. Matthews, you will pay Mr. Rodriguez $200 for damages, plus $500 in court costs for wasting everyone's time with your frivolous demands. And Ms. Matthews? Judge Judy paused as Karen looked up with red, swollen eyes. The next time you think about bullying someone who can't fight back, remember this moment. Remember how it feels to face someone who won't be intimidated by your husband's money or your empty threats. Karen stumbled toward the exit, her dignity in ruins as the courtroom watched the complete destruction of an entitled tyrant. If Judge Judy's epic takedown of this entitled Karen gave you chills, smash that subscribe button and tell us in the comments which part of this demolition was your favorite. This is what real justice looks like. Within hours of Karen's courtroom humiliation, cell phone footage of the confrontation exploded across social media. The hashtags Judge Judy destroys, or Karen meets justice, and courtroom comeback trended worldwide as millions watched an entitled bully finally face consequences. In her BMW outside the courthouse, Karen sat frozen, mascara streaking down her cheeks as she read the flood of comments celebrating her downfall. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications from former friends sharing the video, her country club group chat going silent after someone posted the link. Meanwhile, Miguel drove back to work with tears of relief in his eyes. For 3 weeks he'd lived in fear of losing his job, his reputation destroyed by Karen's vindictive campaign. Now, Strangers were calling him a hero for standing up to entitlement. Back in her chambers, Judge Judy quietly reviewed the case file one final time. She'd seen thousands of bullies over the years, but something about Karen's complete breakdown felt different. This wasn't just about $200 anymore. It was about sending a message to every entitled person watching that their behavior had consequences. In suburban coffee shops and factory break rooms across America, people replayed the video, finally seeing someone stand up to the Karens in their own lives. Justice had spoken and the internet was listening. 3 months later, the reverberations of that Tuesday morning confrontation were still being felt across the country. Judge Judy's takedown of Karen Matthews had become more than just a viral video. It had become a cultural moment, a rallying cry for everyone who had ever been bullied by entitled people who thought money could buy them immunity from consequences. In her final interview before retiring, Judge Judy reflected on the case that had defined her legacy. Karen Matthews represented everything wrong with our society, she said, her voice carrying the same authority that had commanded that courtroom. People who use their privilege as a weapon, who mistake wealth for worth, who think they can terrorize others without consequence. But here's what Karen learned that day. Justice doesn't care about your zip code, your car, or your husband's bank account. Justice cares about right and wrong. The impact extended far beyond one entitled woman's public humiliation. Videos of the confrontation were being shown in law schools as examples of judicial authority. Human resources departments used clips to train employees on workplace bullying. Parents showed it to their teenagers as lessons about treating service workers with respect. Karen herself had retreated from public life entirely. Her social media accounts went dark, her country club membership quietly lapsed, and neighbors reported seeing moving trucks at her mansion. The woman who had once terrorized store clerks and delivery drivers had learned that accountability was the one thing money couldn't buy. Miguel Rodriguez, meanwhile, had become an unlikely symbol of dignity in the face of adversity. He never sought fame or attention from the incident, continuing to work his shifts and save for his daughter's education. But when reporters found him, his message was simple. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, no matter what they drive or where they work. The courthouse where it all happened became something of a pilgrimage site. People would drive hours just to sit in the same gallery where justice had been served so dramatically. The bailiff reported that applicants for small claims cases often specifically requested Judge Judy's courtroom, hoping to witness another moment of accountability. Legal experts called it the Matthews effect, the phenomenon where entitled plaintiffs would suddenly drop frivolous lawsuits rather than risk the kind of public humiliation Karen had endured. Lawyers across the country reported fewer harassment cases as bullies realized that their behavior might end up broadcast to millions. But perhaps the most profound change was in the countless service workers, delivery drivers, and retail employees who found new strength in Karen's public destruction. They stood a little taller when faced with entitled customers, remembering that somewhere out there, a judge had proven that their dignity mattered too. Judge Judy's final words that day had been prophetic. Remember how it feels to face someone who won't be intimidated. And across America, people were remembering. They were standing up. They were refusing to be intimidated. Because sometimes justice doesn't whisper. Sometimes justice roars. This incredible story proves that entitlement always meets its match and accountability never goes out of style. If this video restored your faith in justice, absolutely destroy that like button, hit subscribe for more epic courthouse moments, and join our membership for exclusive content that celebrates real American heroes. Tell us in the comments, what was the most satisfying moment of Karen's total destruction? And remember, when you stand up for what's right, you're never standing alone. Storytime with Justice, where entitled people meet their match and working people get the respect they deserve. Karen interrupted the witness. Judge Judy gave her a lesson on respect. The Los Angeles courtroom was a pressure cooker of tension that Tuesday afternoon, its fluorescent lights casting sharp shadows across the worn wooden benches packed with spectators, who sensed they were about to witness something extraordinary. The air hummed with anticipation, thick and electric, as smartphones were already positioned to record what was billed as a routine small claims dispute over property damage. But routine was the last word anyone would use to describe what unfolded when one woman decided that courtroom rules, judges' orders, and basic human decency simply didn't apply to her. The gallery was standing room only, an unusual sight for a civil case, but word had spread through the courthouse hallways that Judge Judith Shaindlin, television's most feared arbiter of justice, was presiding, and when Judge Judy took the bench, chaos had a way of transforming into unforgettable television. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. The case seems straightforward enough on paper. A dispute between neighbors over a damaged fence, some trampled flowers, and accusations flying in both directions. The plaintiff, a soft-spoken woman named Margaret Chen, sat nervously at her table, her hands folded over a manila folder bulging with photographs and receipts. She had dressed respectfully in a modest navy blazer, her graying hair pulled back neatly, every inch of her demeanor screaming preparation and respect for the process. Her evidence was organized, her witnesses lined up, her case built methodically over weeks of careful documentation. She understood what everyone who enters a courtroom should know, that justice operates on order, procedure, and mutual respect. But across the aisle sat the defendant, a woman who would soon become internet infamous simply as Karen. Dressed in an expensive cream-colored pantsuit that screamed entitlement, arms crossed defiantly over her chest, she exuded the unmistakable energy of someone who had spent her entire life getting her way through volume and audacity. Her perfectly highlighted hair, designer sunglasses perched atop her head like a crown, and the way she checked her phone repeatedly while the bailiff read the case details. All these told a story Judge Judy had seen 1,000 times before. This was a woman who believed rules were suggestions, that authority was negotiable, and that if she just spoke loud enough and long enough, reality itself would bend to her will. Judge Judy entered with her signature brisk stride, black robes flowing, her sharp eyes already scanning both parties with the precision of a surgeon, preparing for a complex operation. At 78 years old, she had presided over thousands of cases, dismantled countless lies, and humbled more entitled defendants than anyone could count. Her reputation preceded her like thunder before lightning. When she sat down and opened the case file, the room fell into respectful silence. Everyone except Karen, who sighed loudly, rolled her eyes, and muttered something under her breath that made her attorney visibly wince. What happened next would be replayed millions of times across every social media platform, dissected in law schools, and remembered as one of the most savage displays of judicial authority ever captured on camera. But first, someone had to push Judge Judy far enough to unleash it. Judge Judy adjusted her glasses and glanced down at the case summary, her expression unreadable, but her energy commanding absolute attention. "All right, Miss Chen," she began, her voice crisp and authoritative, cutting through the courtroom like a blade. "Tell me what happened." Margaret Chen rose from her seat with visible nervousness, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her folder. "Thank you, Your Honor," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here because the defendant, Ms. Patricia Henderson, destroyed my property. She drove her SUV through my fence, ruined my garden, and then refused to pay for the damages. I have photographs, repair estimates, and a witness who saw everything." Judge Judy nodded, her pen already moving across her notepad. "How much are you suing for?" she asked. Margaret cleared her throat. $4,200. Your Honor, that covers the fence repair, the landscaping restoration, and the emotional distress of having my sanctuary destroyed. Judge Judy's eyebrow raised slightly at the mention of emotional distress, but she let it slide for now. "And you have receipts for all of this?" Margaret nodded eagerly, pulling out a stack of papers organized with colored tabs. "Yes, Your Honor. Everything is documented here. The fence company gave me 3 quotes and I went with the middle option. The garden center itemized every plant that needs to be replaced. I even have before and after photos showing the extent of the damage." From across the aisle came an audible scoff. Karen, or Patricia Henderson as the court documents named her, shifted in her seat with theatrical exasperation, her arms tightening across her chest. She leaned toward her attorney, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth, and whispered loudly enough for half the courtroom to hear, "This is such a waste of time." Her attorney placed a restraining hand on her arm, shaking his head slightly, but Karen brushed him off with a dismissive wave. Judge Judy's eyes flickered toward the defense table for just a moment, a brief flash of recognition crossing her features. She had seen this type before. "Many times, Ms. Chen," Judge Judy continued, returning her attention to the plaintiff. "Walk me through what happened. Start from the beginning." Margaret took a steadying breath and began her story. "Your Honor, Ms. Henderson and I have been neighbors for 3 years. For the most part, we kept to ourselves. But about 6 months ago, she started parking her SUV partially on my property, because her driveway was too full. I asked her politely several times to stop, but she ignored me. Then, 2 months ago, she was backing out of her driveway, and instead of being careful, she just gunned it in reverse and crashed straight through my fence. The impact was so hard it took out 8 feet of fencing and destroyed my rose bushes that I'd been cultivating for 5 years. As Margaret spoke, her voice gained strength, the pain of the violation evident in every word. I ran outside immediately and she was just sitting there in her car, talking on her phone like nothing had happened. When I knocked on her window, she rolled it down and said, "I'll get around to it," and then drove away. That was it. No apology, no offer to pay, nothing. I've called her 17 times, Your Honor. 17 times. She either doesn't answer or hangs up on me. I filed a police report, but they said it was a civil matter. So here I am asking for what's fair. I just want my fence fixed and my garden restored. Judge Judy was writing notes, her expression thoughtful. And you have a witness to the actual accident? Margaret nodded vigorously. Yes, Your Honor. My neighbor from the other side, Mrs. Gloria Ramirez. She was in her front yard watering her plants when it happened. She saw the whole thing and she's here today to testify. Judge Judy looked toward the gallery where an elderly woman in a floral dress sat primly, her hands folded in her lap. Mrs. Ramirez, you're the witness? The woman nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Judge Judy made another note. We'll hear from you in a moment. Then Judge Judy turned her gaze to the defense table, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Ms. Henderson, she said, her voice level but carrying an edge that made everyone sit up straighter. What's your version of events? Karen uncrossed her arms and sat forward, her face already twisted into an expression of aggrieved victimhood. Your Honor, this whole thing is completely blown out of proportion, she began, her voice dripping with condescension. Yes, I accidentally tapped her fence while backing out, but it was barely damaged. She's making it sound like I demolished the Great Wall of China, and those rose bushes? They were half dead anyway. She's just trying to extort money from me because she knows I have it. Judge Judy's pen stopped moving. Did you pay for any of the damage? She asked flatly. Karen waved her hand dismissively. I told her I'd take care of it when I had time. I've been very busy. I run 3 businesses, Your Honor. I don't have time to deal with every little fender bender. The words hung in the air like a confession. Judge Judy's expression didn't change, but everyone in the courtroom sensed the shift, the subtle tightening of her jaw, the way her fingers drummed once against her desk. I see, she said quietly. Ms. Chen, call your witness. Gloria Ramirez rose from the gallery with the quiet dignity of someone who had lived long enough to know that truth and patience always won in the end. She walked to the witness stand, her sensible shoes clicking softly against the courtroom floor, and placed her hand on the Bible as the bailiff administered the oath. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? The elderly woman's voice was clear and steady. I do. She settled into the witness chair, smoothing her floral dress, and looked toward Judge Judy with respectful attention. Mrs. Ramirez, Judge Judy began, her tone gentler now, the way it always was with honest witnesses who showed proper respect. Tell me what you saw on the day in question. Gloria nodded, her weathered hands folding neatly in her lap. Your Honor, it was a Saturday afternoon, around 2 o'clock. I was watering my petunias in the front yard when I heard this loud engine revving. I looked up and saw Ms. Henderson's big black SUV backing out of her driveway very fast, too fast. She wasn't looking behind her at all. I could see she was on her phone, holding it up to her ear with one hand. Then, crash. She slammed right into Margaret's fence. The impact was so hard that pieces of wood went flying. Some of the fence posts were completely knocked over, and her beautiful roses, the red ones she was so proud of, were just crushed under the tires. As Gloria spoke, her voice carried the weight of genuine concern, painting a picture so vivid that everyone in the courtroom could see it happening. I dropped my hose and started walking toward the accident because I thought maybe she was hurt or in shock. But then Ms. Henderson just sat there in her car, still talking on her phone like absolutely nothing had happened. Margaret came running out of her house, and I could see she was devastated. She loves that garden more than anything. When Margaret knocked on the car window, Ms. Henderson barely, "That is a lie!" The shout exploded from the defense table like a grenade. Karen had shot to her feet, her face flushed crimson, one perfectly manicured finger pointed accusingly at the witness stand. She's completely lying. I was not on my phone. I was not going too fast. Her voice escalated with each word, drowning out Gloria's testimony, filling the courtroom with raw, unbridled indignation. The elderly witness recoiled slightly, her eyes widening in shock at the sudden verbal assault. Judge Judy's head snapped toward the defense table, her expression transforming from professional neutrality to something far more dangerous. Excuse me? Her voice was quiet, deadly quiet, the kind of quiet that preceded earthquakes. But Karen was too far gone in her righteous fury to notice the warning signs. I don't have to sit here and listen to this woman lie about me, she continued, her voice shrill now, bouncing off the courtroom walls. This is ridiculous. She's making things up. You can't let her say these things. The courtroom had gone completely silent except for Karen's voice, everyone frozen in collective horror at what they were witnessing. Judge Judy slowly removed her glasses, folding them with deliberate precision and placing them on the bench in front of her. The gesture was small, but it carried the weight of an executioner sharpening a blade. Her eyes, now unobstructed, locked onto Karen with the intensity of a laser cutting through steel. The silence in the courtroom was so profound that the hum of the air conditioning sounded like a roar. Even Karen's attorney had shrunk back in his chair, his face pale, knowing exactly what was about to happen, but powerless to stop it. "Ma'am," Judge Judy began, her voice low and controlled, each word dropping like a stone into still water. "I'm going to give you one opportunity, just one, to sit down and be quiet." She leaned forward slightly, her hands flat on the bench, her posture radiating absolute authority. "This is my courtroom, not yours, mine. When a witness is testifying, you do not speak. You do not interrupt. You do not scream across the room like a child throwing a tantrum at the grocery store. Do you understand me?" Karen's mouth opened, indignation still burning in her eyes. "But, Your Honor, she's lying, and I have every right to—" It was the wrong move, catastrophically wrong. Judge Judy's hand came down on the bench with a sharp crack that made half the gallery jump. "Zip it!" The command cut through the air like a whip. "I am talking right now, and you are going to stand there silently and listen to every single word I say, because clearly, nobody in your entire privileged life has ever bothered to teach you basic manners or respect." The transformation in Karen was instant and visible. Her face, moments ago flushed with righteous anger, now drained to an ashen white. Her mouth snapped shut, her body going rigid as the reality of her situation finally penetrated her bubble of entitlement. Judge Judy wasn't finished. "You walked into my courtroom acting like you're doing everyone a favor by being here, checking your phone, sighing, rolling your eyes, muttering under your breath. I saw all of it, and now you have the audacity, the sheer unmitigated gall to interrupt a witness who is under oath and scream at her like she's your servant?" Judge Judy's voice rose with each phrase, not to a shout, but to something far more powerful. Controlled fury that reverberated through every corner of the room. "Let me explain something to you very clearly. You see that bailiff standing over there?" Judge Judy's finger pointed toward the uniformed bailiff standing near the side door, a mountain of a man whose expression remained professionally neutral, but whose posture had shifted into readiness. "One more outburst from you, just one more word out of turn, and you will be held in contempt of court. Do you know what that means? It means fines. It means possible jail time. It means you'll be escorted out of here in handcuffs while everyone in this gallery records it on their phones and it lives on the internet forever. Is that what you want? Is that how you want to be remembered?" Karen's lips trembled, her entire body language collapsing inward like a building losing its foundation. "No, Your Honor," she whispered, her voice barely audible, all the fire extinguished and replaced with pure fear. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, her eyes never leaving Karen's face. "I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that. Speak up." Karen swallowed hard, forcing the words out louder. "No, Your Honor, I'm sorry." Judge Judy nodded slowly. "You will sit down. You will remain silent. And when Mrs. Ramirez finishes her testimony, if you have questions for her, your attorney will ask them during cross-examination. That's how this works. That's how it's always worked. Do you understand me?" Karen nodded, frantically, lowering herself back into her chair like a scolded child, her hands gripping the edge of the table so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Mrs. Ramirez," Judge Judy said, her tone transforming completely as she turned back to the elderly witness, warmth and respect flooding back into her voice. "I apologize for that disruption. Please, continue with your testimony." Gloria Ramirez, who had been sitting frozen during the entire exchange, nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Your Honor. As I was saying, when Margaret knocked on the car window, Ms. Henderson finally rolled it down and said something like, 'I'll deal with it later,' and then just drove away. Margaret was left standing there in her ruined garden, crying. I went over to comfort her and took some pictures on my phone of the damage because I thought she might need evidence. The fence was completely destroyed in that section, and those rose bushes had been there for years. They were Margaret's pride and joy." Judge Judy made notes as Gloria spoke, occasionally nodding. When the elderly woman finished, Judge Judy thanked her sincerely and excused her from the stand. Gloria returned to her seat in the gallery, and the entire room seemed to exhale collectively. Judge Judy then turned her attention back to the defense table, where Karen sat rigid and diminished, all her earlier bravado evaporated. "Ms. Henderson, it's your turn now. Stand up and tell me your side of the story. And I suggest you choose your words very, very carefully. Karen stood slowly, her expensive pantsuit suddenly looking more like a costume than armor. Her hands shook as she tried to organize papers she'd barely looked at before. "Your Honor, I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she began, her voice small and uncertain. Karen's voice wavered as she attempted to present her defense, but the damage was already done. Her evidence consisted of a single blurry photo she'd taken on her phone weeks after the incident, showing Margaret's fence from a distance, and a handwritten note claiming the repair estimates were inflated. No receipts, no expert opinions, no credible documentation. Just excuses wrapped in increasingly desperate justifications. "Your Honor, I really was planning to pay for it eventually. I just needed time to get quotes from my own contractors. And honestly, I think she's exaggerating the damage to get more money out of me. That fence was old anyway, and those plants probably would have died on their own." Judge Judy listened with an expression that could only be described as withering. Patience, occasionally jotting notes, but mostly just letting Karen dig her hole deeper. When Karen finally ran out of steam, trailing off into uncomfortable silence, Judge Judy set down her pen and fixed her with a stare that could melt titanium. "Ms. Henderson, let me tell you what I see here. I see a woman who caused property damage, admitted to it just now in this courtroom, refused to pay for it, ignored 17 phone calls from her neighbor, and then had the audacity to come in here and act like she's the victim. Your behavior today, your complete disrespect for this court and for the witness, tells me everything I need to know about your character. You think the rules don't apply to you. You think if you're loud enough and indignant enough, you can bully your way out of responsibility." Judge Judy picked up Margaret's evidence folder, holding it up. "The plaintiff has photographs, receipts, witness testimony, and a police report. You have excuses and attitude, judgment for the plaintiff in the amount of $4,200. You will pay every penny of it. Case dismissed." The gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo for eternity. Margaret Chen's face crumpled with relief, tears streaming down her cheeks as she mouthed thank you toward the bench. Karen stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, disbelief painted across her features. "But that's not fair. I don't have that kind of—" Judge Judy's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "We're done here. Bailiff, next case." Karen's attorney grabbed her arm, practically dragging her toward the exit before she could cause any more damage. Within hours of the case concluding, the courtroom footage exploded across every corner of the internet like wildfire. The clip of Karen's interruption, followed by Judge Judy's devastating takedown, racked up over 3 million views in the first 24 hours alone. Hashtags like Judge Judy Justice, a Karen Gets Schooled, and Respect the Court trended nationwide, with thousands of comments pouring in from viewers who couldn't get enough of watching entitled behavior meet its match. "This is exactly why Judge Judy is a legend," read one viral tweet with 40,000 likes. "She doesn't just rule on cases, she teaches life lessons." Another comment captured the sentiment perfectly. That moment when Karen realized she wasn't at the manager's office anymore. Chef's kiss. Legal experts and courtroom analysts dissected the moment on cable news, praising Judge Judy's handling of the disruption as a masterclass in maintaining judicial authority. Professor Daniel Morrison from UCLA School of Law told reporters, "What Judge Scheindlin demonstrated was the perfect balance of firmness and fairness. She shut down disruptive behavior immediately, protected the integrity of witness testimony, and maintained the dignity of the court. Every law student should study this interaction." Even courtroom bailiffs and clerks shared the clip in their private groups, nodding in recognition at behavior they'd all witnessed countless times but rarely saw handled so decisively. But beyond the viral fame and legal commentary, the case became something more profound, a cultural touchstone about respect, accountability, and the consequences of entitlement. The Georgetown debate case showed how authenticity matters in politics. But Karen versus Judge Judy revealed something equally important. That authority, when exercised fairly and consistently, is not oppression but protection. Judge Judy didn't humiliate Karen for entertainment. She stopped Karen from derailing justice, from intimidating a witness, from making a mockery of a process designed to give everyday people like Margaret Chen a fair hearing. In doing so, she reminded everyone watching that respect isn't about kissing up to power. It's about recognizing that some rules exist to protect us all. For the millions of viewers who watched Karen's comeuppance, the lesson resonated far beyond courtroom walls. In workplaces where entitled colleagues talked over others in meetings, in schools where bullies thought volume equaled validity, in communities where some people believed their convenience mattered more than others' rights, the message was clear. Disrespect has consequences. You cannot interrupt your way to being right. You cannot demand fairness while denying it to others. And when you treat people and institutions with contempt, Don't be surprised when that contempt is reflected back at you tenfold. Margaret Chen got her fence repaired and her garden restored. Karen paid every dollar of the judgment, her name forever attached to one of the internet's most memorable lessons in humility. And Judge Judy? She simply moved on to the next case because in her courtroom, justice doesn't take breaks and respect isn't optional, it's mandatory. The gavel had spoken, and millions heard its echo. Treat others the way you want to be treated or prepare to learn that lesson the hard way. What did you think of how Judge Judy handled this situation? Was she too harsh or was this exactly what Karen needed? Drop your opinion in the comments below, and if you loved watching entitled behavior get shut down by real authority, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because we've got more incredible courtroom justice stories coming your way. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this lesson about respect. Thanks for watching and remember, respect costs nothing but disrespect can cost you everything. See you in the next one.